believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Brandes, also known as Ricky Brandes, and a great episode for you today. Today I have dear friend, somebody who's a regular on this show and a regular on the Union of the Unwanted, so please check out past appearances of my guest, attorney Brian Festa. He's also one of the founders of We the Patriots USA, which is a nonprofit organization that helps people fight for medical freedom. And today, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the lawsuits he's involved in and much more revolving COVID and health freedom. So I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. But before we get into this conversation, I will attempt to get through this intro quickly. This is a Value for Value show. If you get some value out of these discussions and the guests and podcast episodes that I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. And it doesn't have to be financial. You can rate the show, review the show, subscribe to the show on all the platforms. You can find the Ripple Effect Podcast, and you can find it on just about every audio platform and many of the video platforms like Rockfin, Rumble, BitChute, and Band.video. And if you guys are looking to watch the Ripple Effect Podcast on a TV, most people have a smart TV or a Fire Stick. Open up your web browser, go to rumble.com or rockfin.com or bitchute.com, and put in the Ripple Effect Podcast, and you can watch the video version of all our episodes on these platforms. I know many people watch YouTube on their Fire Sticks or smart TVs, and most TVs and most devices in general already have YouTube apps on there. But watching some of these alternative platforms on your TV or computer really isn't hard. Just go to a web browser, open up the rumble.com or rockfin.com or whatever it may be, or go to my website, rippleeffectpodcast.com, and you can find all these links, and you can watch Ripple Effect Podcast like it's still on YouTube. I do have a YouTube clips channel, which I neglect from time to time. It does have some great clips. If you're new to the Ripple Effect Podcast, check out the YouTube clips channel, and you can find clips of great past guests that have been on the show, so maybe you want to go back and check out those specific episodes. And if anyone ever wants to create a clip from one of the past great guests I've had on, like Freeway Rick Ross or Glenn Jacobs, also known as Kane from WWE, or any of the other big guests I've had on throughout the years, send me the clip and I'll add it to my clips channel. Now let's get to how you can support our show financially. And there's plenty of ways of doing it. If you want to send a one-time donation, we have PayPal, Venmo, we have a crypto wallet if you want to send Ethereum or Bitcoin. We have a Patreon page if you want to support us monthly, and we have some sponsors. We have University of Reason, which is created by Richard Grove, the host of the Grand Theft World podcast. If you're at a crossroads in life, if you're looking to connect with a liberty-minded, freedom-minded community, check out the University of Reason, help yourself, and you can support the Ripple Effect Podcast at the same time. We have Content Safe, which is a great sponsor because that's how I get my videos on all the video platforms I'm on. I upload to one location, and he syncs all my channels together, so he saves me tons of time in uploading. We have also Element Electrolytes, which is a healthy, no artificial flavors, no artificial colors, electrolyte drink mix. You add it to your water, you can stay hydrated, relieve yourself of many of the symptoms due to dehydration, like headaches, muscle fatigue, low energy, and many, many other symptoms due to dehydration. And if you use the link in the show description or on my website, you will get a free gift with every purchase. So check that out. Also, my merch store, check out my merch store. And that's about it, guys. I'm attempting to get through this quickly. So enjoy this amazing conversation, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. quite a few times, but I think this is the first time one-on-one we've had a chance to catch up. You want to fill people in on why the move and maybe any new projects or any other things you have going on?
Sure, sure. So, you know, there's a variety of reasons, but I mean, I think it should be obvious to anyone who has ever lived in Connecticut or the Northeast, as you do, why one would want to move out of that area to a more conservative state. And I'm sure that it's crossed your mind more than once. Uh, so I don't think I have to explain it in great detail to your audience, but basically, we moved for freedom. We moved to protect our children. We saw what was going on, obviously, in Connecticut, not only with regard to the shots, the vaccines, religious exemptions being repealed in Connecticut, which we fought vehemently against for years and are still fighting in court now. We still have active lawsuits against that, and we will continue those lawsuits regardless of where we live. But it came to the point where obviously we couldn't stay there. It just wasn't safe for our family anymore. We came to that conclusion because aside from even the medical freedom issues, you have all this indoctrination in the schools. You have critical race theory and transgender ideology being pushed on kids, being mandated as part of curriculum. We have a lawsuit about that as well in Guilford, Connecticut, as you know. So my son, being, special needs, requires services that he can only get in a public school, especially in Idaho. But in many states, he would need to attend a public school in order to get that. But even in Connecticut, we didn't trust in the private school that he was going to be free from that kind of indoctrination, because it's in private schools too. It's not just in public schools. So
You saw that.
We made the
remember that Megyn Kelly Bill Maher interview where she was talking about how they were having issues with their private school, and they were asking, questions that she wasn't comfortable with and teaching things she wasn't comfortable with. And then she started talking to, and I believe this was in New York, and she started talking to other parents, and she talked about it on the show. And it was funny because I think a lot of these topics become political, or the media likes to make it political, or politicians like to make it political for their own value and use. But you have somebody from the left, Bill Maher, and Megyn Kelly from the right, more, I guess you would say more on the right, and they were completely agreeing with all these issues. And Megyn Kelly was talking about how this issue, she thought it was an isolated issue, like one school. And then she was talking to other parents with kids in different schools, and it was happening in public schools, private schools. Like, she felt like there's nowhere she could go in New York. So like you're saying, like, these aren't little isolated issues. These are huge issues, and it's being pushed and mandated in every school system, which, ends up making it very hard for us to balance out our options on what is the best thing to do for our kids.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next part of my story about moving. So we had hoped, our hope was that by leaving Connecticut, we would escape these things, right? And we wouldn't be dealing with these kinds of battles in Idaho. But lo and behold, the Caldwell school system, where my son attends and also where our business is now headquartered, Caldwell, Idaho, was proposing a transgender policy for schools that would make it permissible for a student to use the bathroom or locker room of his choice, and also would require the use of this gender affirming language, gender preferred pronouns, anywhere on school grounds, and require staff to engage in this, even if they had religious objections, and require students to engage in this, and they'd be disciplined if they didn't. We fought very hard. Here's the difference, though. Here's the difference between Connecticut and Idaho. When they proposed something like that in Idaho, in Caldwell, Idaho, which Canyon County, where we live, is very conservative, the parents came out 1,000 strong at that school board meeting. Churches came from all surrounding towns. Monday night, at the last school board meeting to discuss this, they had speakers set up, coffee stations for people outside. They had a prayer and worship service. They had a huge crowd of people at the school board meeting, this tiny little district office, which only holds, they only let the first 60 of us in. I was one of the people to get in, and I did speak again for the second time against this. But because of that kind of backlash, and because we have a majority Republican controlled legislature, which is not just rhinos, there are actually true patriots in our legislature who are controlling the legislature. They actually, one of the state representatives came to the podium first and said that there's going to be legislation. We're drafting it this week to address this, to basically to ban these kinds of policies in response to this. And in response to that, the superintendent announced that they were putting a pause on this policy, that it will not be implemented this year. And they're not going to be able to implement it most likely because the legislature hopefully is drafting a bill. I haven't seen the full final bill text yet, but hopefully the bill will be strong enough to make it illegal for any school, because there's a lot of schools that have already passed such a policy. We are preparing litigation regardless, because we can't trust that this bill is going to solve all the problems. There's a lot of school systems now that this has come to light in Caldwell. A lot of people are looking at their own district's policy and say, wait, this was passed in secret in executive session last year. We didn't even know about it. So there's a lot of surrounding towns that already have this in place, and they're just waking up to it now. So hopefully this legislation will make all of those policies null. It'll make them illegal, and that won't happen. But this is the difference between Connecticut and Idaho. We also have an Attorney General, Raul Labrador, who's extremely on our side and is a true patriot. He's been tweeting about it, that what the Caldwell School District is doing is illegal, that he won't stand for it, that he's going to go after them. That's the difference. When they try to do this, see, the public schools are taken over by the leftist agenda, by the unions. They're everywhere in the United States, they're taken over by the left. But the difference is, in a state like Idaho, you have people in office that actually fight back against them. You think Attorney General William Tong in Connecticut would ever stand up against transgender policy in schools? I mean, he embraces this kind of stuff. He wants to do more to promote it. And he would love to have a boy in every girl's bathroom and a locker room and such. I mean, that's the kind of policy he promotes. He loves this kind of stuff, and they're totally anti-Christian. They're anti-religious, and we just didn't want to raise our children or run our business, quite frankly, in an environment like that. That being said, Ricky, we are still, as I said, going to fight for every single resident of every single state in this country. We are a national nonprofit law firm, as you know, WeThePatriotsUSA.org, and we're going to continue fighting. Most of our battles are in blue states, obviously, so we're going to keep filing lawsuits there regardless of where we're headquartered.
So is the Freedom Alliance CT, is that organization still continuing with people running it to help people in Connecticut?
So no, that was our organization. Nobody was raising their hand and jumping up and down to step up to the plate to take that over. Don and I, Don Jolly and I started that organization first, as you know, back in 2019. And we, although we were fighting obviously before we had the organization even against this in Connecticut, but we didn't really see a need to keep that going. It did officially dissolve last year. We didn't see a need to keep it going because of the fact that We the Patriots USA covers all 50 states, and we still have a very strong presence in Connecticut. We still have our primary attorneys are based in Connecticut. We have more lawsuits in Connecticut than any other state still, and we're not going away. So we have more tools and resources to do more in Connecticut than the Connecticut Freedom Alliance did. We have way more donors and supporters for We the Patriots USA than we ever did for CTFA, as we called it. So there was really no need to keep two organizations going. Now, what I will say, well, I have a couple things to say, but what I will say is that we are still planning events too in Connecticut. We have an event coming up on May 22nd at Yale University. And that is going to be to protest Fauci speaking at the medical school graduation. So he's going to be speaking at the Yale Medical School graduation. We have 3 speakers coming in that are confirmed already. Dr. Cordy Williams, Dr. James Lyons Weiler, and Joshua Coleman are going to be all coming in. And I'm sure you know all of them. They're going to be coming in to join this protest against Fauci, because we can still do things like that. As a 501c3 organization, we can't do legislative lobbying, but there's nothing to say we can't hold, a protest or a rally against an individual. Obviously, this man is responsible for so much carnage that we've seen over the last 3 years, and he's been at the forefront. And the fact that they would honor him and have him be their guest of honor, speaking at the commencement and probably giving him another honorary degree. They've probably already given him one before. I don't know. But it's just absolutely, to us, despicable that they would even consider having him there. So we are going to be having that protest. That'll be May 22nd. More details will follow, but we've already posted a save the date. We have events we're planning all throughout the country, but that's a big one. We're also going to have our national conference coming up in Boise in June 2nd and 3rd. And we're about getting ready to launch ticket sales for that. So stay tuned on wethepatriotsusa.org. That's going to be a huge conference with some really big names from around the country coming to speak there. That'll be a 2-day conference. But another thing I wanted to say just about Connecticut is, the other reason we didn't continue CTFA is we were primarily engaged in lobbying with Connecticut Freedom Alliance. So that's not something that we found to be very effective anymore. Because why? Well, the legislature is co-opted by one party and is completely controlled by one party. And there's a supermajority there of people that are just hell-bent on taking away all of our rights and freedoms. And as we saw in the last election in November, this past November, there's no signs that that's going to stop, even though there were people on the ground who did a great job of trying to organize people, mobilize people to work on campaigns or to even run themselves for office. There were people that did amazing work on the ground in Connecticut this last election cycle, all through the summer too, not just in November and October and November, but all through the summer. They were working and campaigning, doing town halls, virtual town halls with candidates. They did a great job. But ultimately, what ended up happening is that it didn't matter. Either the elections are rigged, or there's just such a super majority of voters who are in favor of this kind of fascism that they won overwhelmingly. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. So rather than beating our heads against the wall in a state that, for all intents and purposes, is lost legislatively speaking, why not just focus on the litigation, on the lawsuits, which is what We the Patriots USA does and has the resources to do.
And so you have some specific lawsuits that you've been working on recently. That do you want to get in some of the ones that new ones that you've been trying to get some attention for?
Sure. So there's one we just filed in Idaho. Again, things are not perfect in Idaho. Okay, but we just filed one because now that we're here, obviously people who live here are reaching out to us and saying, "Hey, I heard you're right over here in Caldwell. Can you help me out?" Just like when we were in Connecticut, there'd be someone from Hartford or New Britain or wherever, that Waterbury, that would be reaching out to us because they knew that we were based in Connecticut. So this young lady who has a 2-year-old daughter had a 2-year-old daughter in daycare, in New Horizon Daycare in Meridian, Idaho, was expelled. Her daughter was expelled from that daycare simply because she tried to assert a religious exemption to childhood vaccinations. Now, she did have some vaccinations prior, before the mother woke up and learned what was in a lot of these things and how this could harm her daughter, and learned about the use of aborted fetal cells and testing. And so she once she learned of that, she said, well, I can't do this anymore. I have a religious objection. And she asserted that, but the school said, no, we don't accept religious exemptions, even though Idaho law is like the strongest law in the entire United States, or it's among the strongest, if it's not the strongest in the wording. The wording in the statute says a parent shall be exempt if they assert an exemption to these vaccinations on religious or any other grounds. So on any grounds, even a philosophical exemption, whatever, you don't even have to have a sincere religious belief. If you say you have an exemption on any grounds whatsoever, they have to honor it and exempt you. And yet the daycare is saying, well, hey, we're a private business. We don't agree with that. We're not going to honor that. That's fine. Maybe for a state-run business, maybe that's, what they do, but we're a private business. They're based out of Minnesota. This is a conglomerate of daycare centers. They operate in many different states, but they're based out of Minnesota. And so apparently they feel that they can do business the same way in Idaho as they do in Minnesota and don't have to obey the laws. And obviously that's not correct. And so we filed a lawsuit just last week against that daycare. Now, why is this important? This is one daycare in the entire state of Idaho. It's a big state, right? One daycare that's refusing vaccine exemptions in Idaho. Why is this an important case? What does this have to do with everyone else across the country? Because, our focus is on public interest litigation. So we only take lawsuits if we feel they're going to have a benefit on the public at large. And that doesn't just mean Meridian, Idaho. That means all through the state or the country, right? Well, it has a huge implication for the rest of the country, because if we allow daycares and schools to get away with refusing exemptions, even when they have exemption laws on the books, if it can happen in Idaho, Ricky, it can happen in Tennessee, it can happen in South Carolina, it can happen in Texas, it can happen in Florida. Okay, it can happen in any state that has strong exemption laws, because Idaho has about the strongest as you can get in their statutes. And if it's happening here, then it can happen anywhere. And that is just as big a threat, in my opinion, as repealing the exemption. Because if you're not going to honor the exemptions even when they're on the books, then why do they even need to repeal them? They can just get away with it. No one's going to stop them in court. And all these private schools and private businesses and whatever else can just, and maybe even some public schools can just start deciding we can just ignore it. Nobody's going to hold us accountable in court. So we'll just pretend like there's no religious exemption law here. That's a huge threat. So we need to set a precedent and have a shot across the bow here that, listen, if you're caught doing this, we are going to go after you in court.
Yeah, and even though there are obviously a lot of cases of people who have given a religious exemption form or asked to be exempted for the COVID vaccine or any vaccine, and even though there's a lot of examples of unsuccessful attempts to be exempted, there's also a lot of people who have had some luck doing it. And like my kids have never been vaccinated. They've never had any issues in our public school, not yet, thank God. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a lot of parents that I talk to that are like, wait, we can exempt our kids of vaccines to go to public schools. I thought I had to. And I'm like, no, you can, you can at least get, not all schools, but I'm like, most schools, I'm like, are pretty, lenient in regards to this, not too hard, at least in our area. And if you, and like worst case scenario, it doesn't work, but I'm like, all you have to do is submit a form. So submit the form, see what happens, go from there. And then they'll bring up the conversation of like, well, I'm not that religious, or I'm not that, and I'm like, they're not going to quiz you on your religion. I'm like, I know plenty of people who consider themselves Christians or Catholics or whatever, who aren't the most hardcore in going to church and that type of thing. So they should, I've never, in my personal life, I don't know anybody who I have given the form to, because I have given people templates to the form. The one that I've used, I'm like, here, obviously just put in your information or modify it as you would like. But this is what I used, and I know plenty of people who have thanked me for giving them the form. So my point is, like, give it a try. Don't assume that it's not going to work, and don't give in, because a lot of our issues that we have today are because people just kind of gave in, and they did it initially with the COVID vaccine, where they made life so just everything so inconvenient. And they're like, just give in to the vaccine, just give in to what we're telling you to do. And you'll have your life back. You can travel, you can go back to school, you can do. And so many people just gave in because they're like, oh, well, I don't want to wait, or it's going to, I'm not going to be able to travel, or I'm not going to be able to go back to school, or I'm not going to be whatever. And I would tell some people, I'm like, listen, don't give in, like, just hold off and wait and the truth will, you can only suppress the truth for so long. Eventually the truth will come to the surface, and we're seeing that now more and more with people like Ed Dowd from Blacks, who worked for Blackstone, coming out with his numbers. And I love what he's doing, because he's literally just coming out and saying, he's like, I'm not telling you what's happening. All I'm telling you is there's some numbers that obviously highlight that something is happening. And he's not pretending to know exactly what the cause of it is, but you can't ignore the statistics that are being released. And it's unfortunate, because how many people who were just naive to what was really going on in the world, naive to the fact that the government or big pharma would purposely force something that they knowingly knew could cause some deaths onto the public. I mean, there's just so many people who are just doing their 9 to 5, taking care of their kids, and all of a sudden their whole world just stopped, and they're just like, well, they're telling me to take this, and I've never been down these rabbit holes of questioning government or questioning corporations or questioning anything, and so you just went along with it. And you see it over and over again with people that were pro-vaccine, people who were very much a believer of, for some reason, that big pharma and the government was here to save us, and now, because of injuries or personal experiences, are completely in the other direction. And so I mean, we live in some crazy times. Do you see, with obviously legally you're involved a lot, do you see any justice for some of the people who are responsible for this?
Well, that's a tough one, because about the PrEP Act, right? And because of the emergency declaration, and because these were so-called countermeasures with regard to the COVID shot anyway, there's no liability under the PrEP Act. And now they've just added it just last week to the childhood vaccination schedule. The CDC schedule now has COVID shots included as a recommended shot, which now subjects them to immunity from liability under the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, which means they'll have basically immunity forever. Yes, there's vaccine court, which is almost impossible to recover in, but they're basically going to have product liability immunity, which no other product on the market has for forever. So it's going to be very difficult. I think the only way that anyone is going to be held criminally responsible, accountable, I think that maybe is where you're leading. Besides just, civil suits, you're leading about people being prosecuted, is if we get the right prosecutors in office, not only at the federal level, obviously the attorney general, but obviously get, state prosecutors, district attorneys, states attorneys general, who are actually going to go after these people and file actions in federal court or referrals for prosecutions. Those are the only people that can refer something for prosecution as a prosecutor. I am a private attorney. I work for a nonprofit. We are a private organization. We don't have any right under the law to be criminally prosecuting anyone. We could ask the prosecutor to do it, but right now, with the current people in office in most of those positions, good luck. And it really would have to come, I think, ultimately, not only, yes, it would be great if some of these states, their attorney general, the attorneys general would actually do something, but ultimately it's going to have to come from the Department of Justice and the Attorney General of the United States, which, the current administration is, in my opinion, pretty compromised. And I think you would agree with that. I think they're obviously in bed with the people who have done this. They're not going to be going after Anthony Fauci or, Rochelle Walensky or anyone else that you can think of who was involved, or anybody at Pfizer, Albert Bourla. They're not going to be going after those people, are they? I would be shocked if Merrick Garland, decided to start prosecuting Albert Bourla. It's just not going to happen. That would be some kind of weird, twisted movie if that happened. And I still wouldn't even believe it if I saw it with my own eyes. So we need to get better people in office, because all we can do is file civil litigation. And even that's restricted because of the immunity shield. However, there's one path forward, and that's in the realm of employment. There is still a path forward with workers' compensation lawsuits. I don't know if you see what Children's Health Defense has been doing. Ray Flores, he's an attorney who works for CHD and has been doing excellent work with regard to workers' compensation lawsuits. It's not really something that we handle, but I just want to make people aware that they're doing it, because I think that it's excellent. And I think that although even that recovery is pretty limited, because workers' comp, you're not going to get multi-million-dollar wrongful death judgments like you would in court, but at least it can provide some compensation for people who are injured as a result of a shot mandate at work, even for the COVID shot, which, so this is the one workaround, PrEP, and the childhood vaccine schedule is workers' compensation. So that's probably the only justice you're going to get as far as, holding people accountable for, the harm caused by the shot, the physical harm, which I think is what you're asking about, caused by the shots. But obviously, the other kinds of harm, people have lost jobs, people have been kicked out of their schools, people have been, denied equal opportunities, or people who, have disabilities, were refused medical accommodations, religious freedom. All that stuff we can take on, and we will continue to file lawsuits, and we will continue to hold them accountable. We have two major lawsuits. You asked about other lawsuits. We have two major lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies right now. One is against Bristol Myers Squibb. The other is against Takeda Pharmaceuticals, which is actually, we have that lawsuit in the District Court of Massachusetts in Boston, because they're actually headquartered in Boston. So those were both filed by groups of employees who were fired for asserting a religious exemption and having that denied because they requested an exemption from the COVID shot mandate. I know this seems all like old news to people because it's 3 years into this, but these people are still suffering. These people are still, in many cases, out of work or in lesser positions than they could have been had they stayed with their companies. And remember, litigation takes a while. So even though in some cases, like the Bristol Myers Squibb lawsuit, we filed it earlier last year, obviously it's still going on because litigation on average takes at least 2 to 3 years to resolve through the courts. So yes, we're 3 years into it, but remember the COVID shots didn't even come out to be mandated until like August of 21. So, and then people didn't even really get fired till like October, November, usually October, November, December 21, January of 22. So really we're only about a little over a year after most people started getting fired. So we're not that far into the litigation realm. As far as litigation speaks, it's still early. In terms of litigation, it's still early in the game because litigation takes several years. Sometimes it can take as much as 4 or 5 years. If you're going to get a case all the way to the United States Supreme Court, it can take as many as 4 or 5 years to get this resolved. So we can't sleep on this though. Some people say, well, COVID, even Biden declared the emergency over. COVID's over. Stop focusing on that. Focus your efforts in other places, which we are focusing in other places. We have the critical race theory lawsuit. We are fighting against transgender ideology that I just told you about in schools. We're doing a lot of other things, but we can't sleep on the COVID stuff. Why? Because we have to see these lawsuits through. Because otherwise, if we don't, what's going to happen? If we were to just withdraw all these lawsuits and say COVID's over, we don't have to worry about it. Not only would the people who are still being harmed still continue to suffer, but what about when the next pandemic comes out, when the next big health crisis comes out and they have to lock everything down or force another kind of injection on us or other kind of medical treatment, no matter whatever it is. If we just stop everything now we don't have good precedent on the books because we stopped halfway through our litigation because people just, I guess, had COVID fatigue and wanted us to stop. So we just stopped it. No, that would be stupid because then we'd have to start all the way over again from ground zero. Okay. None of that, it doesn't matter how many lawsuits we filed. If we didn't see them through and get victories, they're all useless. So we'd have to start, if this happens again this year or next year, we have to start all over again with new lawsuits and have to go maybe 3 or 4 years on from that. So people need to realize we have to see this through. We have to continue to support this kind of litigation, not only our organization, although of course we do appreciate your donations, but support all of the organizations doing this. I mentioned Children's Health Defense. It's a lot of other organizations that have been fighting against this kind of COVID fascism, Liberty Council, Pacific Justice Institute. I could go on and on. So support as many as you can because we need all of these organizations to continue to grow and to be here. So the next time they try to take away our rights or lock us down, will be protected. I mean, what do you think about? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
What do
sure.
you think about what's going on in Ohio? I mean, is this another
Train,
planned false flag type of event? Is what's going on here?
the train derailment.
Yeah,
Well, let me just give people a piece of advice, and it's funny because Midnight Mike, who does the OBDM show with us, he lives 100, I don't know, so around 100 to 200 miles from that area, and he's noticed like birds dying and less activity and a lot of like weird stuff with his bird feeders and stuff like that. He said his chickens are fine, but they are like basically little dinosaurs, so they've survived a lot throughout the years. I feel like chickens.
they are. They are.
And so, but I've said this to people. I told Mike in a text message that go get checked immediately, have a clean bill of health, because if anything starts happening, from now now forward, at least you know that you were healthy. And if God forbid him or a loved one or somebody starts getting sick and they're like, oh, this isn't related, you already had this and you just didn't pick up on it, like go get checked and have a clean bill.
That's very smart. That's very smart. I wouldn't have. I didn't even think of advising people do that. That's great advice.
Yeah. Well, it just, it doesn't hurt, right? And I don't know if it'll be useful or not, but it definitely doesn't hurt if God forbid something happened. And you can't trust the government to say that the air is clean. I mean, people know about the fire pits in overseas with the military, whatever they were. Is that what they call them? I don't know what they call them, fire pits or whatever they.
I don't know.
But there was a whole lawsuit about it because they were burning stuff. I don't know if it was Afghanistan or Iraq. They told the military just burn all the stuff because they didn't know how to dispose of it, and it was probably cheaper and easier to just burn it all. And these fire pits, they were saying were, it was safe to be around or whatever. And all these Marines or whoever was in the military that was doing this for the government, they were all getting cancer and getting sick or whatever, and then they sued them and they're like, well, you lied to us, this stuff wasn't healthy. Same thing with 9/11 and the first responders. They told them that the air was safe to breathe, and then next thing you know, everybody who had the courage to go out there and help and out of the goodness of their heart took time out of their day and took many people and a lot of energy to go out there and help people, and now they're suffering. So it's like, don't.
Yeah. And Camp Lejeune, that's another one. Camp Lejeune, and that was 1953 that started, and they just Congress finally passed something to give them relief. What, last year? I think it was. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Don't trust the government. No way. Kristen Megan Kelly, who hosts our new podcast, Vets and Visionaries with Kristen Megan. So, we have our first original podcast, Faithful Freedom with Terry Gregson, which has been very successful. We have a new one now that just started in January. I want to tell people about, called Vets and Visionaries with Kristen Megan. Kristen Megan Kelly is an industrial hygienist. I don't know if you've ever had her on, but she's brilliant, and this is her area of expertise. So she's doing the rounds now. She was invited to co-host a Twitter space the other day, or just yesterday. And then she's going on, I think, possibly on Emerald Robinson's show. People are reaching out finally during all the masking craziness of COVID. She and her colleague Tammy Clark were screaming from the rooftops that, listen, this is our area of expertise. All right, we've been trained. I mean, she did it in the Air Force. For 9 years, she was in the Air Force. She did it in the private sector. So she's worked for the government as well as in the private sector. She's like, listen, we are the OSHA experts. We know what this particulate matter can do to people, how to test it, how to protect yourself from it. Please listen to us. And finally now, during the masking, during the pandemic, nobody listened to them. But finally now people are reaching out and asking for her advice. So she's making the rounds right now, and I can put you in touch if you'd like to have her on. But she's going to be also at our conference as well. Her and her colleague Tammy are both going to come and speak because we love the work that they do. And now she's a member of our team because she hosts a podcast for us. So, but absolutely, I will put you in touch and have her on to talk about this, because it's just, she's brilliant. She knows her stuff, and she will tell you, do not trust the EPA. Do not trust anything they're saying. It's all garbage. She's reviewed everything they're saying, and she can tell you exactly why it's garbage. Okay. And because she has been in these kind of situations before, where there's been hazardous spills, whether it's airborne or whether it's on the ground, and she's had to do testing. She's the one that they send out into the field to do the testing and to lead the teams and to get proper PPE on them and all this. So she's the one that would be the best one to talk to about this particular event. While it's obviously still current in the news, I'm very worried for the people living there. I have family in Ohio through my wife, and actually also my brother-in-law's family as well is from a different part of Ohio. So I have through different parts of my family, I have a lot of relatives who live in Ohio, and some not too far from where this happened. So it is concerning to me and my wife personally. And then I saw yesterday there was some chemical spill, some toxic waste spill in Arizona or something. Some truck spilled, and they were going out to. I'm like, what is happening now? This is going to be the new thing. We're going to start having these toxic spills all over the country. Arizona is not really close to me, but it's getting a little too close for comfort now because I'm out there in Idaho, and I'm like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen now. We're going to have things happen on the West Coast, the East Coast, the Midwest. We're going to have things all over the place where we're going to have these toxins in the air, and the only way to lock us down is to wear a cloth mask again, and that's somehow going to save us when we go out to the grocery store. And we have these toxins floating through the air. I mean, this is going to get crazy really quick if this is their new strategy. I don't know if it is, but
Well, have you heard about that movie White Noise?
I saw it. 2 months ago.
A lot of people
I saw it 2 months ago, and when I saw this news, the first thing my wife said to me, we saw this news come out about, we were reading on Twitter or wherever it was, because the mainstream media wasn't posting it originally. So we saw it on Twitter, and my wife said, look what happened. She's like, this is just like that movie we saw, White Noise. It's almost exactly the same thing. It's Ohio, truck crashes into a train, the train derails, and this big plume of chemical toxic smoke goes into the air. I mean, kills everyone. That's exactly what happened. Predictive programming.
I believe it was like in the same location roughly too.
It was. It was filmed. I don't know if it's set there. It was filmed. It's set in Ohio, I think, but I don't know if it's set in the exact same place. But it was filmed in that exact same area. That's where they actually shot it.
That is so wild. I mean, that's like a glitch.
That's too much of a coincidence.
It is. Well, that's the thing about like a lot of these conspiracy theories, quote unquote, is that like how many coincidences do you need before you start believing that there's something more going on? Like, there should be a deadline where it's like once you have this many coincidences, you can't call it a coincidence anymore. It's no longer a coincidence. And all this stuff is really weird. Even with the UFO stuff, the fact there's no pictures of what they've shot down. There's only allegations and there's so much weirdness, and I don't know. I don't know what to think about all of it. Well, what do you think?
That's a distraction, I think. All those balloons. I'm wondering if that was partly a distraction to keep people away from the Ohio news too. People don't want that's why the mainstream media hasn't really been covering it. And that's why they're trying to downplay it. Oh, no, everything's safe. It all went up into the air. It's all gone now. Don't worry about it. And just look at us shooting down our third balloon over, Lake Michigan or whatever it was. It's just getting a little too, I don't know. It's getting a little too crazy, but I do. And then I heard something yesterday that the next big thing is going to be digital, the cyber attack on our digital identities. That's going to be the next thing, is that everybody's identities. What did I see? I just saw a tweet about it yesterday, and basically they're going to be able to steal your identities and make you whoever they say the government, meaning them, when this attack happens. And then who knows, they can say whoever you are, whoever they want you to be, even if it's a criminal or something. So that's what a lot of people are predicting will be the next like major cyber attack, I guess, is on people's identities. But I don't know where it is, but it's just, I don't know, it's out of control, and we got to stay close to God, but we all, first and foremost. But as long as we're here on this earth, we have to keep fighting, Ricky. We just have to keep fighting these battles. I love all the work that you continue doing, exposing this, because again, the mainstream media is a joke. And anybody who still gets their news from, cable news or the nightly news, I don't care what it is really just living in a fantasy. because that picture of reality that's presented to us is not at all what's really happening. But yeah, any other questions for me before I run today?
Not really. I think that we covered a lot of stuff. I mean, I do have another conspiracy theory. I'm kind of intrigued with this Joe Rogan podcast that didn't get released. Have you heard about it? The one with Randall Carlson. He recorded it, didn't get
I think
released.
I heard you talking about on the Union of the Unwanted on Monday.
Well, it's fascinating because it's the same timing of all this UFO stuff, and they're not releasing it. The thing is, like, there is a link, I feel, to old scriptures, some of these, kind of religious practices, spirituality, and some lost wisdom, maybe some a understanding of the world or the environment that maybe it's being suppressed or it's lost, and we're kind of rediscovering it. And I think it would completely drastically change the way we look at things and the way things work. And obviously, I'm referring to Ancient Apocalypse, right? Was that what it's called? The Graham Hancock series, and all the work that Graham Hancock's done, all the work that Randall Carlson has done. There's Graham Hancock said this, and I can't remember if it was on the last time he was on Rogan or where he said it, but he made such a good point. He's like, a lot of times we look at old scriptures, old writings, and we just kind of say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They were just crazy people, or it was, they were trying to explain something they didn't understand. And he's like, you can never dismiss any of that stuff. And he thinks that dismissing it is a big mistake, because we could learn from our ancestors and learn from this old wisdom. And so I'm really interested in, like, this whole, where this is going, and if there's any relation with Joe Rogan is supposedly not releasing this episode because it's controversial. But how controversial can it be? Randall Carlson had a guy on who has been working with, like, some plasma, anti-gravity type of technology, and I'm like, well, it only can be controversial if what it does, it tells you that all the scientists that we put all our faith in, and that the way that they've told us the world exists and the way it works, that's what happens when you have a cat. Sorry about that loud noise. But we recently just got a cat, because we actually had a couple of mice roaming around the house. My parents have cats, and they are beautiful, natural born killers when it comes down to rodents. And since we've had the cat, we haven't had any rodents. So and my mother had a couple.
That'll do it.
We had one over. But yeah, so do you ever get involved in or go down these rabbit holes, and do you have any intriguement in these topics?
Oh, of course. I mean, listen, I get pilloried because of the fact that, I appeared on the Alex Jones show one time. We actually had a prospective client. It was actually going to be a really good case. I won't tell you any details of the person's name, of course, but it was going to be a really good Second Amendment case that we actually were looking into just within the last week or so. And the person looked us up and saw that I was on Alex Jones one time, and said, "Oh, no. I can't be involved. I can't, you guys must be crazy or something, because you went on Alex's show." One time I went on his show. I didn't endorse everything he said. I didn't partner with him or InfoWars. One time I was on his show, and because they found that one interview of me on his show, I'm a conspiracy theorist. So yeah, I guess I'm known, Ricky, as like a major conspiracy theorist now. I'm like Alex Jones light or something.
I feel bad for Alex Jones, because he's been doing a lot of decent work for a long time. Don't get me wrong, he puts a little bit of his twist and a little bit of his exaggeration and entertainment value into it. But when you look at all the ex-FBI, CIA, all the anti-war journalists and people you've had on, all the documentary filmmakers, all the people who, a lot. I mean, there's a lot of truth tellers, credible truth tellers, people that, that the majority of people in the alternative community all like, that have been interviewed on that show. I mean, he has brought in a lot of people. He's exposed me to a lot of new information and different researchers and journalists. And yet, because of this one Sandy Hook thing, he has become the Sandy Hook guy. And it's crazy. I'm like, he was at Waco. You know, he I'm gonna kill this cat. He was at Waco, but he's been like he literally has been in the front lines forever. You know, this guy,
Oh yeah.
you know, I'm like,
He's a legend. Listen, I wear it as a badge of honor that I got on his show one time. I'll probably never be on again, but I got on it not because of anything bad, just because there's just so many people, on a waiting list to get on that show. But I'm honored that I was invited on, and I don't hide it. And if people want to think ill or less of our organization because one of the co-founders went on the Alex Jones show one time for 45 minutes, then fine, hold it against me. I don't really care. But listen, he has done great work. I don't agree with everything he's ever said. Okay. I don't agree with anything really I don't agree with everything anyone's ever said except Jesus Christ. That's about it. There's no other person who's ever lived that I agree with everything they've said.
but that's a valid point and worth highlighting because I have such an issue with this where people you'll endorse one opinion or some piece of work that somebody has done that is valid and good and worth talking about or highlighting, and then they'll find one thing that maybe you wouldn't endorse. They're like, oh, but they also said that. I'm like, okay, great, but does that make this other thing not valid or not a good point or not good work? I mean, there's plenty of articles in really crappy, written by really crappy news organizations that I don't endorse and I don't like. But if they put out an article that I can share and be like, hey, listen, look what, the New York Times posted, or look what, whatever it is, Mother Jones or whoever, look at this article that they wrote. And it's like, okay, I don't endorse most of their work, but this article was well done or made a valid point. It's like you can't discredit, and you shouldn't agree with anybody 100% of the time. You can't be a critical thinker. You can't be somebody who's honestly open to all sides and all perspectives and agree with one person all the time. I remember when Rogan was initially kind of afraid of COVID and the vaccine, and and people know that when I started my podcast, he was a big influence of mine in 2013, and people are like, oh, Rogan believes it's a big deal, and I'm like, what's your point? Like, I don't if just because I agree with him on certain things, or if I'm a fan of some of his work, doesn't mean I agree with him on everything. And people have to stop idolizing others and really think for themselves and realize like it's completely okay to disagree with others, and it doesn't mean that you discredit everything they do and all their other ideas and perspectives. So I wanted to highlight that because that is a huge, and that really only contributes to the tribalism and the lack of critical thinking when you basically pick a team and then you feel like you have to defend them regardless, what the issue is.
Right. No, I mean that's ridiculous. And I use the word idolize people, and that's exactly what it is. You're making you're making false idols basically of people, of other people. That's why I said the only person I'll 100% agree with and worship is Jesus. I'm not going to worship anyone here on earth, that's for sure. And like you said, that's part of critical thinking. But that's just how humans are. They always focus. I think it's human nature to always focus on the negative. So they'll pick out one like bad thing you said or did, or one time you were wrong, and they'll focus on that. So I could win like 25 victories in court, but no one will remember that. Just like with Alex, they remember Sandy Hook. No one will remember the 25 victories. They'll remember that one loss I had. And I haven't only had one loss, but whatever. But let's just say it was only one to 25. They'll forget about the 25 and say he's a bad lawyer because he lost that one case. Okay. Well, guess what? I got news for you, by the way. Losing cases is not the sign and signal of being a bad lawyer, because the greatest lawyers in the world have lost cases because you have other variables. You have a judge, you have a jury, you have other people that are involved in making the decision that no matter how great of an argument you make, they might already have their mind made up sometimes. All right. It's not to say they're not trying to be impartial and doing their best, but we're all humans. We're all flawed. So there's other variables, and there's no lawyer that is going to be 100% always winning, no matter what venue they're in or what judge they're in front of, or they're always going to win their case. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in every profession. The greatest surgeons in the world have lost a lot of people on the operating table.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And yeah, that's a huge part of just kind of unraveling things too, is just people should be arguing ideas and not, defending teams. And that's a huge issue with, that's what happened with COVID. I mean, many of us prior to COVID were, the people who were fighting for, vaccine rights, and then having the ability to have exemptions and all this stuff, and really deeper into the vaccine issue prior to COVID. Many of us understood that, like, okay, this isn't a political issue. This is like just a freedom issue, which should be a issue for all Americans. It's a, it's a health issue. It's an anti-pharma issue because you can't trust them. You can't trust the government. You can't trust, it's like you have people who constantly lie to you. Don't take their word for it now. They're just going to continue to lie to you. And it wasn't until 2020 when all of a sudden, like, everybody who agreed that pharma was bad, all of a sudden it became almost a right-wing thing to say that you don't trust the vaccine. And it's like it just shows the, like, how tribalistic we are and how well they understand you can use that to their benefit. And they did. And then I feel like as time has gone by, people are looking at and probably because their boogeyman Trump is gone, people are much more open to the discussion of the vaccine and the COVID vaccine, and they're not quite as concerned about, like, being labeled left wing or right wing due to their stance on the vaccine or their stance on masks or their stance, because that was the problem with this for a long time, was that based on what your opinion was on these specific issues, and regardless how good of a point you made, you would be labeled, just because you had those opinions.
You know what's ironic, though? I agree with you 100%. But you know what's ironic is their boogeyman Trump supported the shots. He's the one that pushed them warp speed. So anyone saying, "Oh, you're a Trumper, or you're a rightist, you're extreme right Trumper because you're against the shots," that makes no sense. Because even to this day, he touts that he pushed Operation Warp Speed and he saved so many lives. No. I mean, for that reason alone, I'm not a big fan of him right now.
I was going to ask you about that too, about because I'm glad.
This is me personally. My organization doesn't get involved in politics, but now this is just Brian Festa talking about as a private citizen. I'm not a big fan of him, and honestly, if it's Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump, DeSantis has my vote.
I completely agree with you. I mean, the thing is, like, and I think the High Wire and Del Bigtree actually did a great and honest episode on this whole topic of what we're talking about, because people will say, well, how can you be for Trump, or how can you, he's like, he's the one who pushed Operation Warp Speed, and he's the one who was bragging about the vaccine or whatever. But they went back and they showed a lot of press conferences where he was the only one pushing back in regards to the lockdowns, the masking. He was, obviously it didn't work out, but there's quite a few times where he had a deadline, like, we'll have the country open by this, so he was pushing back against the fear mongering. He was pushing back. He was pushing back a little bit. So to me, it's like, it doesn't justify, the things he's saying now. I think a lot of it is because he's so obsessed with always looking like he made the right decision and he should get credit for this, and he's constantly striving to find places where he can get more credit, that he's just trying to be like, okay, yeah, this vaccine that all you guys like, you should be giving me credit for that because I'm the one who helped fund it. And but it is concerning because in the moment, I honestly, I remember thinking in the moment, I'm like, thank God we have a president who doesn't really give a F about what people think and is willing to push back. Because I'm like, if we had somebody who was just going to push more fear mongering as president, because a lot of people, like we were talking about before, they idolize these people. So you look at the president, the all knowing person who's going to save us and tell us, what's really going on. And if we had somebody there like a Hillary Clinton or a Joe Biden scaring everybody, or whoever, maybe even somebody from the right wing who kind of was scaring everyone and going like, no, this is really bad. A quarter of the world's going to die and all this stuff. Like, people would be even more extremely afraid, and the suicide rate would be higher, the child abuse would be higher, all these other things, and you talked about it earlier. and about how like, oh, people want to move on from COVID. My there's a lot of lasting effects, jobs, mental stability, relationships, friendships. A lot of horror and negative things came out of COVID. Even the people who think like, oh, I made it. It's like there's still some trauma. I'd see people who are still wearing masks, not even correctly. Like they're, nobody's wearing them correctly. Now in Massachusetts, they're basically just, chin diapers, like Miriam Hanim calls them, and it's like, they're chin diapers. So it's like, why are you wearing them if you're not even wearing them correctly? It's not because you're trying to prevent any disease from being spread, or you're trying to prevent yourself from getting one, which doesn't make any sense. But that's what they thought at the time, that if they wore one, it would stop them from getting something. But it's because you've been traumatized. You had the news, which you trusted, and politicians that you trusted on TV telling you to be afraid. And they said it for so long, and they had that freaking ticker with the death numbers increasing every day and telling you how bad it is and how many cases we had. And you saw the lines at these tests.
Where's the ticker now? Where's the ticker now of all the people dead from the shots?
Yeah, well, how about exactly? Where's the ticker for the vaccine injured, or the vaccine deaths? Like, where's the ticker? If they show that's the thing. This is why every once in a while I'll go back and I'll watch one of the documentaries like A New Normal or Pandemic or any good documentary that has a lot of the news videos of what was going on at the time. Really, you could just watch Event 201. It's basically the same thing, because everything worked out the way they thought it was going to work out. But if you look at people don't realize how much BS was being spread at a time, or we tend to forget because it was a long time ago. And like any traumatizing thing that ever happens in your life, you're like, you know what? I don't want to think about it. I want to move on from it. I don't want to, ponder on it. It was a horrible time in my life. Let me just move on from it. I have my life back. We're good. But go back. Watch what the news was telling you. Watch what these doctors, these mainstream doctors were telling you. Watch all the predictions that never happened, all the death numbers that never happened. Watch all the suppressed information. Go back and rewatch that stuff, because knowing what we know now and the things that are undeniable now, you go back and you watch that and you're like, how could they be so wrong? Well, they could be so wrong because they were lying to you from the beginning. It was, I'd love to get your opinion on, and I don't want to hold you up too long because you probably have other stuff to do, and I can't afford to keep you a attorney on the line for longer than an hour. But it's Del Bigtree.
I'm not getting paid, people. I'm not getting paid.
Joke. Del Bigtree mentioned that because he was on the Dr. Drew show, and he mentioned that he thought that this whole thing was planned to basically get the COVID vaccine on the child, vaccine schedule, and to get adults to get vaccinated, because everybody was vaccinating their kids, but adults were like, I'm done with vaccines. I got them when I was a kid. I'm good. Even though you don't have lifelong immunity anyways with these vaccines, which is hilarious that people blame the anti-vaxxers for like the spread of this. I'm like, none of your vaccines have lifelong immunity anyways. I'm like, the only way you're going to have lifelong immunity if you get it naturally, and your body and Mother Nature does what it was designed to do. And do you think this was all a part of just basically capitalizing on the vaccine agenda of trying to just vaccinate everyone and force feed everybody vaccines?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think they overplayed their hand. I don't think they expected this level of pushback on the shots, because most people were vaccine compliant already. But they really wanted to, like, oh, vaccines saved us from COVID. Now they could have a whole army of people who just absolutely loved these shots. And now, they can add so many new shots for every little, sniffle that comes out. We'll have a new shot and everybody will be on board. I think they overplayed their hand. I think they underestimated the number of people that would push back. And I do think the plan was to get it on the childhood schedule, to give it this kind of nearly blanket immunity. Yes, there are a couple of ways that you can still sue, but it's very, very, very difficult. And and even to recover in vaccine court is very difficult, because you have to sue within 3 years from the date of the first onset of symptoms, which most people don't recognize as a vaccine injury, especially if it happens a while after you get the shot. So, which some cases they do, like even what we're seeing now, people dropping dead, having strokes, having heart attacks, the vaccine injuries, people are trying to downplay it. Well, listen, they got the shot a year and a half ago. It can't possibly be from that. And so people are denying it. And good luck getting a doctor to write any kind of note, any kind of documentation saying it was the shot. So they know it's going to be almost impossible to recover. And yes, once you add it to that childhood schedule, even if an adult is injured by it, you can't recover because it's shielded automatically once it's on that schedule. So I do think that was part of the plan. I absolutely do. However, I think it backfired in some ways because there's this massive resistance now. There's a huge amount of people that we've added to our movement, the medical freedom movement, as my friend Dr. Lyons Weiler says, the vaccine risk aware movement. We call it vaccine safety awareness when we have our marathon every September. But the reason we do that, Ricky, by the way, some people jump on us for that. Vaccines aren't safe at all. Don't call it vaccine safety. So that we don't get banned as much and shadow banned, and so we can actually get it out. Because when we put it out as a vaccine safety event, we might actually get promoted in some places that otherwise wouldn't promote us. So we call it vaccine safety awareness. And risk of harm is a safety issue. So it is still related to safety. So we call it vaccine safety, but his term is more appropriate, vaccine risk awareness. Okay. And the vaccine risk awareness movement is grown like exponentially now. I don't know how many more people we added, but it's got to be in the millions that were completely asleep on vaccines. And now, like, perfect example, case in point, my friend Daniel Horowitz from the Conservative Review on the Blaze, he was completely asleep on all the other shots. The only one that he was, well, maybe he knew, maybe he was a little suspicious of the flu shot, but from what he's told me, by and large, he bought into the vaccine program. Okay. Once he started diving into the COVID shots and seeing how they were manufactured and seeing all of the corruption in the pharmaceutical industry, he started diving into the other shots. And he and I had some long conversations. He's like, "Are you saying, Brian, that they're all compromised? That, like, the whole vaccine program, is that really what you're saying?" I was like, "Yeah, look into it. Here's a book. I got a stack of books I can give you to read." Okay. And I told him what happened to my son with the flu shot and other people that I know with the MMR and all these other things, and Gardasil, all the horror stories I've heard from Gardasil, and once I started, guiding him in that direction, I'm not taking full credit because he was doing most of his research on his own. He's a brilliant man, but the point is, we did have some good conversations about it, and he went and researched it, and now he's fully on board. He's one of us. In fact, he wrote a great piece yesterday on his Conservative Review blog, talking about this very issue, about how it extends way beyond. Actually, it was just published yesterday, February 14th, and I just shared it in our channel. If you go to We the Patriots USA channel, great source for news, all of the latest news and updates, not only about our organization, but about news from around the world, really, about all these issues. Yes, Horowitz wrote "Death, Injury, No Liability, and Now a Part of the Child Vaccination Schedule." And that was published on the Conservative Review site yesterday, where he talks about exactly this issue, that it was added so it can get shielded from liability. And he exposes some of the things about, like, Hep B, for instance. I think he talks about HPV in there, other things, some of the other shots that he gets into in here. And he and my friend Steve Deace have come out with a great new book called Rise of the Fourth Reich. It's available now for ordering on Amazon. Little shameless plug. Our organization and me, we are featured in that book. We were interviewed for that book as well. So it talks about all the COVID fascism that's happened, and basically where we go, they set forth a plan of action so that this can never happen again. They set forth a multi-step plan of action for the future. So I encourage everybody to grab a copy of Rise of the Fourth Reich as well. And Steve Deace, who's the author, will be joining us at our national conference, and we'll be doing a book signing there as well.
Awesome. I'll have to look into that book and maybe have him on and to talk about it. But
I can connect you as well if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you're right. If there's a positive that came out of all this, there's so many people that have now had their eyes open to the science being settled with vaccines. A lot of people are now much more skeptical. A lot of people. I'm actually stunned that that Hulu released Dope Sick still while COVID was still in the news and still a thing, because I thought it was a great way of getting people to understand how these drugs get approved, and all the shystiness and all the sketchy science, and how actually the pharmaceutical companies are the ones who are responsible for the science, which means they're only going to show you the science that benefits their product and what makes their product look good, and they have control of that information. So it's and you brought up the HPV, the HPV vaccine. You look at the swine flu vaccine. There's a lot of historical evidence that vaccines are typically were lied to about how safe and effective they are. And people, that's why I keep bringing up, I brought up quite a few times, Dr. Andrew Wakefield's documentary, because his documentary, The Act, was really good into starting from the beginning of the story. Like, here's the beginning of the story. This is historically how we got here. And I think people will sometimes have an easier time digesting something if you start from the beginning. I remember 9/11, A New Pearl Harbor by the Italian filmmaker Massimo. He's been on my show a bunch, and he's been on You've Unwanted. He also did a couple other really good documentaries back in the day, which I don't believe you can find on YouTube anymore. But he had one called Cancer Cures, and he had one, a couple other ones that were controversial. But he, in his 9/11, A New Pearl Harbor documentary, he started from the beginning of like, okay, look, here's some examples of false flag events. Here's some examples of similar things at 9/11, and you start there, and then it becomes a little bit easier to digest that maybe something like 9/11 could have let happen, or could have been covered up what really happened or whatnot. So I think sometimes starting off, with historical events of like, okay, well, here's the things we can't really argue and kind of been accepted historically, and then you work your way forward, and then next thing you know, people are like, okay, now I can connect the dots. But it's the brainwashing with vaccines. There's no issue that I found harder to get people that are really extremists in the pro-vaccine movement, that get them to accept that maybe there's some fuckery with. And I think at such a young, think about it. You have to really, really buy into vaccines. If you're letting doctors and pediatricians shoot up little babies, what's more valuable and more harmless? And what do we adore more than little newborns, infants who we just want to protect and love and all this stuff, and we are letting them be injected with something that's unsafe? That most people assume absolutely not. If it was unsafe, there's any evidence of it being unsafe, we would never let that happen. So I think that conditioning and brainwashing almost starts there. It's like you grow up seeing pediatricians or hearing people talk about vaccinating their kids, and you just don't think anything of it. It's like one of those things where this thing, it must be settled, and it must, and so many kids get vaccinated that I would know if people got harm from it. The problem is, you don't know, and those people are out there, but their voices are suppressed. Or if you're like Jennifer McCarthy, which I give her a lot of credit, because she was coming out, very mainstream celebrity, coming out on mainstream shows, and she was willing to discuss it and push back. And I believe Jim Carrey also, with her support, and kind of push back on our
Rob Schneider is another one.
Rob Schneider.
He's awesome. He is awesome. And he's, he risked a lot in his career, because obviously it still is, I think, a very successful comedian and actor. And he didn't care. He said, I'm not gonna shut up about it. And it's a little easier, I think, when you're in, like, it's easier now, if you're on the conservative, if you're on the right, because it's considered a conservative issue to be, so someone like Candace Owens can get away with it a little bit more. But actually, she was speaking out about it even before COVID. She was speaking out about it and questioning the safety of vaccines. So I give her credit for that. But now people on the right can get away with it more, because it is considered like a right-left issue. But Rob Schneider, he was never considered someone on the right, or politically someone like that, or Jenny McCarthy or something. These are people who or Roseanne Barr. And now she hasn't necessarily spoken a lot about vaccines, but look what she said speaking out against this transgender ideology and all this other stuff, and fascist, what she calls the boot of the fascist or whatever. She's got a new show on Fox Nation called Cancel This, speaking out about cancel culture. I mean, she was someone that was, was a Democrat, maybe it still is technically, and everybody adored her, on the left, and now they don't. Now they hate her, just because she won't bow to their agenda. So I give her a lot of credit too. But anyway, yeah, I do have to wrap. So I think this has been great though. We've talked for over an hour. I always enjoy talking to you. It's never long enough. I just want to conclude with one thing though, what you were just saying about how this did wake a lot of people up. We were just talking about it. I remember on your show about, I want to say 2 years ago, maybe about 2 years ago, late 2020, early 2021. And we were talking about the next thing, they're going to be rolling out these shots. Now, they weren't available yet at that point. The COVID shot wasn't available to the public yet. It was being worked on. But we predicted, both of us, that it was going to be the worst carnage we've ever seen. And I said, I think it's how also we're going to win, but I don't want to win that way. And unfortunately, I was proven right. I do think it's how we're winning this battle, because we've woken so many more people up. There's so many more people on our side. We've grown our numbers probably tenfold. But what a way to win is by losing all those lives. I mean, it's just a horrible way to win, that it had to happen this way. But I mean, people can't deny it now. Even people who were staunchly pro-vax, many of them are questioning now and saying, what is going on with all these people dropping dead? You can't tell me that's just a side effect of COVID anymore. All these people who are 22 years old, these athletes, high school football players, cheerleaders, softball players, soccer player, everything, all of a sudden just dying suddenly in the night in their sleep or something, or on the field, or it just crazy stuff happening. Like, we never, and don't tell me this is normal. We just never noticed it before. That's ridiculous. We would have noticed all these young people dying in these kind of numbers. So anyway, I just wanted to conclude with that, because it brought to mind when you were mentioning that, that we had that conversation about 2 years ago, Ricky. We had this conversation, and unfortunately, it's proven to be true.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I said it before, like, you can only suppress the truth for so long. And that's one of the ways that the truth is going to be exposed, is by, you're going to have so many people who are going to have side effects, or, even worse, have family members who pass away due to the vaccine or the booster, that you just can't deny it anymore. You have to ask those questions. I am still stunned of the people who are living in ignorance or denial, where when that football player passes out on the field, they will jump to crazy lengths to explain it in other ways. And it's like, okay, I'm not saying that's not a possibility. What I'm saying is, what also is a possibility, and you can't deny it's a possibility, is the fact that the experimental vaccine that all of football players and everybody else was mandated to, and he was a very pro-vaccine person. There's tons of film of him masking up all the time and all this stuff. So, and he's a football player. He's a professional. He's probably, spent his whole life analyzing and perfecting his art and his craft of being a football player. He's completely naive to the rest of this world. He probably just did it just to get it over with and go along. So it's not to say that was what caused it. All I'm saying is that it still boggles my mind. Even though I feel like there's a lot of examples of us winning, it still boggles my mind that there's still some people that are just holding on and will not jump that line. But I also think it shatters their whole worldview. And I think when you go somewhere, or you have a discussion with somebody, you go somewhere, you're talking to somebody, and you say something that's like mind-blowing, that completely shatters the way they look at the world. I think a lot of times your first reaction is to resist. It's like, no, that can't be. But you're planting the seed. And that's why I think it is important to start ripples and have these discussions as civilly as you can. You might not think you're getting through to that person, but there's plenty of people throughout the last couple of years that resisted me the first time we had these discussions and pushed back, and now are on our side and on our team.
I think deep down inside, most of them know it, even when they don't admit it. I just think what's the biggest driver of them denying it is fear, because they would have to admit now they did this to themselves and their loved ones, to their children, their parents, that there's a good chance that all of them are going to die now from this. And who wants to admit that, Ricky? Who's going to say, you're absolutely right, I'm going to drop dead now, I'm a ticking time bomb? Who's going to admit that? It's easier to deny, because then you don't have to face the fact of what you did to yourself and your loved ones.
Yeah, that's scary, but let's hope that, hopefully the majority of people don't have some severe negative reactions, and because I know a lot of loved ones and friends who did get vaccinated.
Me too.
Yeah, it's sad, but thank you so much, Brian, for all. Well, I know I'm like, it's sad. We were ending the show in such a negative note, but we're winning, guys. I think there is some.
We're winning. We're winning victories. We're going to continue to win victories. Check us out at WeThePatriotsUSA.org. Follow us on Telegram, and if you can please, if you can find it in your heart, if you find it in your wallet to give, we always appreciate support, because we rely exclusively on public donations for funding.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're on the front lines. You've had people that you're representing on the show, and there's many others that have not been on the show that you represent. And Brian's always been super awesome in regards to anytime I had a friend who had a question and I'd forward them Brian's information. He always helped out everybody he could in any way he can. So definitely support people like Brian and the organization. Tell Donna I said hi. Hopefully we can have her on the show in the near future. And keep up the great work, and we'll keep in touch. Thanks, Brian. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. God bless.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.